Hi, folks. Welcome. Morning. Monday morning again. It happens every week, believe it or not. The analytical people amongst you will tell you that it's a regular occurrence. And as always, we are here, which is also a regular occurrence. But this morning, I think we're talking democracy. Trevor, was that the right word? Didn't think it was something that existed in your vocabulary, but yeah, it came out on Friday morning for some strange reason, and by consensus of one, I think we decided to talk about it this morning. So yeah, maybe you want to give us your starting thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, well, consensus of one. I suddenly realized that on my dream island, my autocratic views were not being appreciated by masters. So he came up and turned around and said he refuted democracy. So I said, okay, well, give me some alternatives. And so I'm opening it up to everyone. What are the alternatives on our dream island as to what sort of system do we want to actually help society on this island actually grow into a better place, given everything that we know about what's been happening in this planet, because we have so much information at our fingertips. And Ed, our analytica par excellence out of the UK, has been able to guide us down the paths of what is right and wrong in his trail running exploits. No, I just want to find out what are the alternative systems? What can we put into our minds? What can we think about?
Great, thanks, Trevor. Right, so Master, I think you were put on the spot there on Friday and this morning. So, Master, your thoughts? What systems work? What systems don't work? Is democracy the answer, or isn't it? Master, are you with us? We seem to be struggling a little bit there with the connection.
No, thanks.
Oh, Master, we're really struggling with your connection there.
Correctly.
That's an old trick. Yeah, that's an old trick, Master. You just sorry, I got We'll wait for Master to come back.
Yeah, Master, I think your connectivity is not great for some reason where you are. We're really struggling. You're breaking up and we're not really hearing you. So I'll come back to you in a moment if that's okay. So right, Herman, you were waving a flag at us. So.
Was I? Good morning. I was quite intrigued by the question, is there an alternative to democracy? And in my world, there isn't. There's no alternative to democracy like there's no alternative to capitalism, except that both need to be transformed. If we talk about transformation of the democracy, I believe it needs to be a lot more participative. It needs to be from ground up rather from top down. We need a much greater involvement by citizens, town hall meetings, dialogue sessions, and direct communication with citizens. Now, I know that some of you would say, bah, that takes too long and it's going to go through all those things. Plus the citizens in general are stupid. Let me tell you that most laws take ages going through all the institutions. So if we have got citizens meetings where laws are, potential laws are being discussed or whatever else, then you could come to a situation where they could be legalized immediately. So the drawn out process, in my personal opinion, is no argument. We also know that collectively people are a lot more intelligent than they are being given credit for, because that's another thing. I remember Churchill's a negative attitude towards democracy. He said, amongst others, just speak to a voter for 5 minutes and you know that democracy will never work. We also know that politicians are disliked and distrusted today, leading to voter apathy. So again, that speaks for an absolute necessity of transforming democracy. And let me give you a couple of good examples, positive examples within South Africa. I don't know whether any one of you has really participated in webinars which have been offered, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, last night I was in a webinar with Shamila Batoy. I mean, it really gives you an impression what the woman is about, what she is not about, etc. And just imagine if our president would get with us into a 1-hour seminar, he would really know what's going on the ground and not getting all these filtered news. So for me, as I said, democracy is the best way of governing. Maybe we find one better, but it needs to be transformation. And as a final argument that I want to bring in, one of the most conservative states in Germany is Bavaria. And there have been movements by citizens, by the population in general, which were miles ahead of those of the politicians. For example, the consciousness around social and environmental challenges is much more developed within the general citizenry than it is with politicians. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Simon. Some great points there. The only question that comes to my mind is if you transform democracy and capitalism, what do they become? They can't be the democracy and capitalism any longer. They've been transformed. They're something else. So, so that's yeah, that's just the thought that comes to mind there. So, Master, let's see if you're in a better reception section there, and if we can hear you now. So, Master, across to you.
Yes, it was just a bit unfortunate that Herman has to start before me, but I think because he sort of like messed up my thinking, but I look, I think an alternative to democracy is something that has not been something new that has not been tested anyway, because we are going into this new island and taking from the learnings of different things, and different aspects of systems, and taking, I think at some stage democracy was the best, because it is also developmental. We know that as South Africans, when we started putting together our constitution, we had to go to various, various states, various countries, and try to pick and choose what will suit us, and which is something that says democracy is dependent on who is at the helm at a particular stage. I mean, coming from a Christian background, I always hear when the president of a country is sworn in, he says, "So help me God." Now, from there, God is no more helping, or is no more at the helm, or is no more leading. People do as they wish, because I believe God is a God of justice, and that is what we need, the God of knowledge, a God of understanding. But we just do this as a tradition or a ritual to say, "So help me God," because even in a democracy, I think there is an expectation of justice. I mean, there is an example of the issue of corruption. I mean, if we are saying "help me God," we would want heaven to be manifested on earth, and I don't believe that in heaven there is corruption. I mean, corruption undermines the whole issue of the suffering of people. It creates poverty for others and stuff like that. So any other system that throws away the moral genre of the society, it is also not viable. I like what Herman is saying, but one of the things is that to a certain extent, I think also democracy has changed shape. We know towards the presidential election and stuff like that, a lot of capitalistic approach was used to buy people into voting to a particular view and vote for a particular person or vote for a particular party or something like that. So it has been diluted to an extent that it does not hold anymore. We talk of participatory democracy. If we talk of participatory democracy, not everybody is participating. It only those that are very closer to decision makers get to participate and influence decision. It is not the broader community that influence decision. Me and you cannot influence a particular decision. So it has failed. Maybe we need to go back to where it started. Maybe God was the foundation of democracy, but as it developed, it lost its essence.
Great, thanks, Master. Yeah, some great points there again. So, right, let's go across to the analytical fellow in the top left-hand corner of my screen, who's gently stroking his stubble, wondering what on earth is going on here this morning. So, Ed, across to you.
Yeah, I agree with Herman, and I disagree with Herman. I think with democracy, it doesn't need to be transformed, it needs to be reformed. And with capitalism, it does need to be transformed and perhaps the profit replaced with planet. But back to democracy, I think it needs to be reformed. And the thing that kind of goes through my mind the most is when I used to audit trade unions, you'd see really good democratic people working at the grassroots. They would put their heart and soul into it. They were honest, they were reliable. And then when you looked at something like the National Executive Council, so the head of the union, they were corrupt. They would fiddle their expenses. They would do things for their own benefit rather than their members' benefit. Yet they were the same people that started out at the bottom. And I think that's what we need to reform. And it strikes me that for evil to triumph, it needs good men to do nothing. And I think that's where I agree with Herman, that we need to get more involvement, more participation in the democratic process. And then it can work. And I think, some of the practical reforms would be make politicians talk to the people more often, as Herman was saying, if you got him on a Zoom call. My MP is very distant from his community, but also he's there for 5 years. He's nice and safe. And before the next election, they kind of do nice stuff. Well, let's make it so that politicians can be easily removed if the public wants it, so that it's easy for the public to call for a vote of no confidence. But yeah, and I think democracy can work really, really well. It is corrupt. We get corruption in the UK, not in the same manner as South Africa, but you do see them looking after themselves. You do see groupthink. When it came to our invasion of Iraq, everyone thought that Tony Blair had done wrong, but when they had the investigation, they never, ever really brought anyone to account, because the whole process was invested in making sure the process kept going. So I think, democracy works because it's the thing that's bubbled to the surface over the last 2,000 years or whatever, but it just needs good people to get involved with the process. And most of us are not on this conversation because we're too busy doing our own stuff. We don't care about issues. We need to get people more involved in the democratic process, more active. So yes, I agree with Herman, local level, more localism, more meetings locally, more discussions locally, more laws made locally. Yes, you need the global stuff and the international stuff and the national stuff, but some of the stuff you can deal with locally. And local people care about their local communities, and they can make some great things. So yeah, reform democracy, transform capitalism.
Great, thanks, Ed. Again, some excellent points to ponder there. So thank you for that. Right, Cecile, your thoughts?
Okay, guys. So I am, when I go onto my island, I think every person that goes onto this island, and I believe in the democracy, but everyone that goes onto that island must walk through a little machine, like in the movie What Women Want, where you speak your mind, where you don't lie, where straight honesty rules everything, so that you know what other people think, so that you don't have hidden agendas, don't lie and cheat and have corrupt stuff. When you can read other people's minds and see what they actually really think. So that's just tongue in cheek, but you guys are really thought this thing out well.
And that's where you're mistaken. Yeah, some of us think, some of us just try to think. But yeah, I love your idea of the machine, Cecile. So yeah, walk through the lie detector and show your true feelings. What a pleasure. But we'll never understand women, so I don't even think there's any hope to get us onto that that card at all. So right, Kevin, let's get across to you next.
Good morning, everyone. To start with, congratulate Trevor on his good impression there of Norman Collier with the mic at the start. That makes a smile. Yeah, democracy. No, I don't think there is a system that's perfect. Democracy's been around a long time. It's probably as good as any other system, but I said there is none that are perfect. I think democracy is evolving to a degree as well, by its own accord. I mean, over in this country, a couple of examples, good and bad. Just relating to Brexit as an example, and that's what really brought it to the fore, I think. They had the vote for the referendum, and then everyone that was on the losing side seemed to be up in arms, protesting and demanding a rerun of the vote, demanding that everyone else that voted the other way was ignorant and so on. And there seemed to be too much of that occurring at the moment, which is on the bad side. But on a plus point with democracy, similar to what one of the things that Ed mentioned, in the UK now there is a system where an MP can be have his vote of no confidence, for want of a better word, for his constituents deselected. That's the word that the constituents can, if they get enough people put their name forward, their vote forward, it can be deselected. So if they fill expenses, or example of Brexit again, if the constituents were enormously in favour of Brexit, but the MP was anti, again you could vote to deselect the MP. So that's a good development forward, I think, in democracy. Yeah, keep giving people to account, if you like. So yeah, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but I think it's probably the best of a bad bunch at the moment.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and I agree, and I think it's sort of been alluded to in some of the other comments as well. You know, this the lack of accountability that many of these MPs and parliamentaries and politicians and even leaders in some cases have breaks the system down, I think. So yeah, it's an interesting one. If we can ramp up the accountability and make sure people know that they're going to be held to account, perhaps that's one of the reforms or reworks of democracy. Right, Jasper, let's get across to you.
Morning. I think Herman had his hand up. He wanted to say something there on Kevin's thing. Let's just hear from Herman.
You muted Herman, but he might have just been scratching his head.
I didn't have my hand up.
I saw him moving there. So, Yeah, I think there's not going to be a solution in our living days, because what is required is an absolute truth. No one are happy to agree to this absolute truth. And with the absolute truth, then will come a whole process of re-education, where people will have to then learn what it takes to, what are the rules for family living, what are the rules for community living, and out of that will come the position of government. And the closest example that we can find is in the first 5 books of the Bible, when Moses led a ragtag bunch of slaves who for 400 years lived under a colonial kind of rule, and now they were supposed to now become a new united force. And it was a big struggle. And most of them wanted to go back to Egypt, and so the first generation died off. And the rest of the generation then had to learn the rules, which is then written up in the first 5 books of Moses, mostly Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And they had to learn what are the rules of family. And family was the highest almost accountability platform. Then they lived as community. So in where they traveled together, each a tribe leader had to keep his people together, and they had specific roles to fulfill in the bigger community. And the roles of government really came in terms of protection. The final thing came when Moses' father-in-law said to him, listen, you need to find a way to spread the accountability and the decision-making and bring it as close to people as possible. And that's when he instituted the rule of let the people themselves choose as leaders over 10, over 50, over 100, and over 1,000. And only the real serious cases bring them up to me. And then later on we read that he had about 72 elders who represented the whole other 6 million people. But those 72 elders were part of a structure that was accountable right down to each family member and in those divisions. But it was not an easy road. And even in that system, and although they became hugely successful, the problem is we live with broken people in a broken world. And, you know, fortunately, the Bible keeps telling us of the things that didn't work as well. But then came Jesus way back later, and before him there was a prophet who was so frustrated with his own people and their greed and the way they worked. And he then wrote a simple little thing. He says in Micah 6:8, he says, he has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly and to love kindness and mercy and to humble yourself and walk humbly with your God. And then later, Jesus came to earth, and by that time, the Pharisees and the priests and stuff have taken the original 10 laws, and by that time it proliferated to about 900 plus laws that was so man-made that doesn't matter what you do, you're going to break a law every day a few times. And Jesus came and he said, listen, the key here, all these laws can be summarized in one thing, one law. Love your God and love your neighbor as yourself. So he puts love for yourself and love for your neighbor equal, and he put the love for God tops. But there lies our problem. There are no longer a recognition of that there's a God who created man and has got good plans for man, and therefore every little man on his little island is becoming his little God and trying to figure things out. And if you have 2 people together, you have 10 opinions. So I can't see any solution in our lifetime, but for myself and my family and where I have influence, I try to go back to the basics, which has proven to work for most of the time for the Jewish nation, and that would be my contribution.
Thanks. Thanks for the Bible study lesson, Jasper. I think you took us all the way back through a couple of thousand years worth of history there. Fantastic. Great. The question is, of course, was it all started with a democratic decision? And I don't think so, because it came from one oak at the top. So you got to be careful with these things. So, Mpolelo, let's get across to you next.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. Cecile is the only lady holding the fort today, so good morning to you as well, Cecile. That's quite an interesting conversation, actually. I think a lot of what has been said already goes back to a little bit of what I said on Friday, is that the system itself probably not a problem. It's the people within the system. So when we speak corruption, when we speak power, when we speak nature of man and what has become of man, that all has to do with people. So I think democracy on paper is probably an amazing and a great system. But I think it's on paper, but what's practiced is a little bit opposite to what we've put on paper. And therein lies the problem. So we keep preaching the system, we keep putting it up, we keep saying this is what we're doing, but our actions are doing something opposite to that. So that's my first comment. The second one is that democracy also has to go with, so the wheels of democracy are oiled with money, and then money comes into the picture. So what you find is that, yes, there's a democratic system, but money gives the power that concentrates all the decision-making, all the resources, and the shaping of the world goes to where money is. Which for me is funny, because that's what we said communism is. It's centralizing everything to a government, and then a government deciding and running on behalf of everyone. But that's what money has done. Money has concentrated power to those who have money. They're the ones who lobby government. They're the ones who say what's going to happen. They're the ones who even control the narration in the world. And get me right, I have nothing against money. If anything, I believe that if you work hard and do what you need to do, you should be compensated for it. But I think what then happens with human beings is that the more money you have, the more power you gather, and the more power you gather, the more centralized everything becomes to those who have the money and to those who have the power. That's why I'm saying on paper, democracy is great, but in practice, it's the opposite. I had a thought, and the thought is not finished, but I was thinking to myself, it's interesting that in governance or in government, we use a democratic system. But when it comes to corporations, companies, the main source of production, the main source of where money is moved and created, those are not structured in a democratic way. And yet money is what greases the wheels of democracy. I'm not finished that thought, but for me, that was quite an interesting thing to think about. Obviously, there's other aspects we can talk about when it comes to democracy, but I think for me, it comes down to that. It comes down to, on paper, it's an amazing system. In practice, we're doing something opposite to that, and that money comes in and plays a role, and money centralizes power, narrative, and how then the world is shaped. That's me.
Great, thanks, Mpolelo. Yeah, so it's an interesting point. What works better, a corporation or a country? Yeah, I'm not too sure. We've got good and bad examples in both situations, don't you? If you look at our Steinhoff saga, for just as a simple example, versus some of the country issues that we see going around the world, and America's a good one to compare to that at the moment. So. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I'm sure one that we could debate for days. The question is, does that become a democratic process or not? And as Herman says, does a conversation actually wind up in a result, or does it just become a conversation? I think that's a huge challenge for me. A lot of talk and a lot of people talking, but is there actually any doing taking place? So, Mpolelo, yeah.
Sorry, I'm raising my hand because there was an interesting question from from Hammond, which I think it's correct, because that's where Trevor started, is to say, is there an alternative and what do we do then? Yes, we've sort of dissected what we think is happening, but what do we do now? For me, I agree with Hammond where he was saying participation by people would probably be one of the best directions to take in reforming. Is that the correct word, democracy? Because as I've said, since money has centralized everything, what that has done is that it's taken power away from the people at the bottom. So people don't participate as much in democracy. I mean, something as simple as justice. When a person experiences a crime in their neighborhood, for them to experience justice, the system is so far away from them and so expensive and requires so many resources. What if we took that justice system and brought it back at a community level? Yes, bring in the proper structure, but make sure that it's at community level, that if a person experiences crime, it is dealt with within that community, and not having to drive to Pretoria and spend 2 years and spend money trying to get justice, then it defeats the purpose in that way. So I think because it will be difficult to get politicians to allow people to participate, I think reforming this would require that people on the ground
seem to have lost Mpulele for a moment.
start changing the economy, where we plant our own food, we create our own banks. Yes, but I'm looking at you there. And we create systems at a micro level that can help us to start being effective at a smaller scale, that eventually you're starting to create democracy at that level where it's been taken away at a lower level and it's been concentrated at the top. I think that's what we can do at a small scale.
Great, thanks, Mpulele. Yeah, some excellent thoughts added on there, and yeah, some great comments and questions in the chat box as well. You know, a couple of them sort of stand out for me, and the one was Master's comment about the commissions and the committees. You know, and the question I ask about that is are those truly an element of democracy, or an element of control? You know, does democracy define that you should put committees and commissions together? And if so, who should be in those committees and commissions, and why should they be there? You know, it seems to me, you know, you're now creating multiple steps of control in the process rather than democratizing the process. And that's where I tend to agree with Herman. If you've got a leadership structure that's been put in there by vote of the majority, anything that is going to get changed should be done by the votes of the majority, not by a commission or a committee. I mean, what are they doing in the middle of the process? They don't belong there. And I agree, they just cost inordinate amounts of money to the fiscus, which again could be plowed back into growing the economy and serving the needs of the people that put the people in power in the first place. So, you know, I think we've put too many hurdles and structures into the process that corrupt the process and allow it to be corrupted and corruptible, because you've got all these levels of separation from those who've been put in power versus those who put them in power, and how do you break that chain? And yeah, as Trevor will know, one of our colleagues, Gavin, likes to say, you know, a camel is a racehorse designed by a committee. And I think that's exactly the problem we're finding in our society at the moment. So yes, Herman.
I just wanted to add something. We also need to be careful. We are very badly influenced by the situation in this country. We must not forget that. And as I mentioned, just one example from Germany. I'm not saying that Germany is the ideal democracy. It is not. The government or the top people in government are just as far removed from the rest of the population as they are in other countries. But there are initiatives from bottom up. And for me, democracy is something where the bottom up movement is critical. And as I said, I mean, we've got every reason to be depressed, actually, what we are seeing. People stealing so that other people must die is surely one of the most horrific crimes we can imagine. And that obviously also clouds our thinking with regards to democracy, etc., etc.
Yes, Trevor.
I don't think it clouds our thinking. I think it focuses our thinking. I think the frogs that are sitting in the gently heating water are starting to feel the heat. It's getting over 65 degrees centigrade at the moment. And I think that's what focuses it. And I'd like to add in 2 more comments that I actually wrote down here. I think this talk of what sort of system, given what we've learned about history, I made 2 comments and I'll just throw them in. Just to say, I can't imagine, given everything that we have learned, that anyone ever wants to be a slave, number 1. And secondly, I can't imagine that anyone, given everything that we've learned, ever wants to be subservient to others. So I'm just going to throw that in. So does anyone, can I imagine that anyone ever wants to be a slave? So I'm thinking of the pharaohs, and we'll forget recent history, but that can't be forgotten. And do we want to be subservient to others? So what system allows us the independence of individuals? And there, Jasper's got the answer. I haven't got the answer yet. I'm listening.
Yeah.
No, I also don't have an answer, but I just not, for the sake of losing it, want to, I think Mpumelelo mentioned it. We have a political system that on paper is a democratic system, but then the whole economic backbone is built on a company system where through the process of shares, those who contribute and take risk, they make the decisions. The rest are welcome to work. And this system seems to work very well anywhere in the world where it's applied, that he who adds value makes the decision. He who doesn't add value can work in that system. But if you want to start making decisions in that system, show me the money. And it seems like our current government is anti that, and yet they rely on the money coming from that system. So maybe it's the mixture of bringing in a level of accountability, or people need to meet certain criteria for their ability to participate in making the rules and the decisions on a country, because that's already happening at a company level or a business level.
Okay, some interesting thoughts, and I think possibly tending on some touchy subjects there towards the end, but yeah, I think we're probably going to, which is great, which I'm not have a problem with at all. I think we can handle it in this forum. So we had sort of gone past the bottom of the hour. So yeah, Trevor, it's you back on the spot again by democratic decision. All eyes are focused on you. What are we going to talk about tomorrow?
Well, I believe Lee might be back tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Master, are you ready for your story?
And you got that, Master?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Tomorrow is what? Tomorrow is my birthday. I'm not ready for my story. Yeah, I just want to relax a bit, but I'm still building it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what I think maybe we should do is I know that I've, over a period of 50 years, have written into the thousands of various articles and thoughts. And as I'm pulling things out of the cupboards and the roofs, and I'm amazed at all the stories. So I believe each and every one of us have written some little thoughts that they've got tucked away somewhere. I'd love us to have people bring out a little article that they wrote 10, 15, 20 odd years ago and come and share it with us. So who's got an article out there that they'd like to share? I've got Chapman there on my left-hand side. I wonder if he's got a little article that he can bring out and then perhaps read the article to us, or a paragraph of the article, and then we discuss it and see what's changed in his mind or something to that effect. Yep.
Good. Yeah, we've got a great thumbs up. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, folks. So we're going to become intellectuals dissecting Ed's little article tomorrow morning and leave all this heavy stuff of democracies and dream islands behind for a day or two. So fantastic. Good. Thanks, folks. Have a great day forward further, and we will see you in the morning, and we'll say happy birthday to Master if he remembers to wake up tomorrow morning and he's not relaxing too much on his birthday. So Master, if we see you in the morning, great. If we don't have a great birthday, and other than that, we'll see you all tomorrow morning. Go well. Cheers.